Afternoon. Oh no, we've got to do a little bit better than that. Good afternoon. Truly, we are blessed to be here. Everybody say, we are blessed. That's true, to be able to network and to truly come together and commune to actually solve some really important problems. And I will tell you, I'm so very, very happy and honored to bring to you all our next portion of this conference. We're actually going to be facilitating a discussion on truly talking about the church and the African American community, and also to expanding that to really talk about how do we engage more with each other from different communities in our own city. I am so pleased to bring to the stage, and we'll just have them come out and sit down. First, I want to bring to you Reverend Jermine Alberty. He is the Executive Director of Pathways to Promise and the Senior Pastor of Bethel Church. He is from Columbia, Missouri, and we welcome you to the great state of Texas. Next, we will have Dr. Keely Petty, one of our own homegrown leaders. She is a pastor of Bethel International Church, a teacher. She's also the executive director of Bethel Prevention Coalition, which I'm proud to say was selected as the nonprofit of the year by the Area Foundation and the Philanthropy Council. She's also a mayoral appointment as to the Commission on the Status of Women, and she's a finalist, you all, so this is something you're going to be able to help us crowdsource and vote for, but she is a finalist for the L'Oreal Paris Woman of Worth. Pastor Keely Petty. And I'm also pleased to bring to the stage a true resource in our community who continues to make sure that we have capacity to address the issues of both truly social issues as well as our mental health issues. Dr. Marquita Evans is the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs for Our Lady of the Lake. She is also the past president of the American Counseling Association. She's a wonderful resource. Please help me welcome Dr. Marquita Evans.
Good afternoon. You know, we're going to ask you to do us a favor. Can you, those of you that are sitting so far back, if you could come forward. I know I'm one of those teachers, right? We want to be able to see you and to interact with you, because as it says in the program booklet, this is supposed to be a conversation. And there'll be a time once we do our presentations that you'll get a chance to ask questions. And the further you're in the back, the harder it will be to ask those questions. So first off, we want to say thank you for being here this afternoon to engage in this conversation that I've been wanting to happen for a long time here in San Antonio. You know, when we're looking at the title of our conference as far as Pathways to Hope, the stigma that's associated with seeking help. When we think about our minority populations, they're the last ones that will go out sometimes and seek the help that they need. Because again, I grew up in Alabama, right? And one of the things that they used to tell me, my background is counselor education. I've been a counselor educator for decades now, and have taught counseling. One of the hardest things, again, is for people to come and say, I've done everything that I can, and now I need your help. In my community, it was usually, baby, you're just not praying hard enough. Or, baby, you just need to give it to the Lord, and let the Lord take care of it for you, and everything's going to be all right. And then a lot of times, again, too, I went to an HBCU that had a seminary. We used to say to some of the seminarians walking around, the theologians, that they were so heavenly minded, they were no earthly good, because they, again, did not take the skills or try to attain the skills to be a true counselor. People misuse the word counseling a lot of times. When you have not prepared, you can be a paraprofessional, but do you really know how to help your congregation? Do you really know the resources that are available in your community to have an impact? Yes, the spiritual part is extremely important. Decades ago when I became a counselor, we couldn't even talk about the spiritual part, right? Because a lot of times we worked in public settings. But now we realize that was probably one of the dumbest things we were taught decades ago. And we have to look at our clients, our patients that we're working with, our students that we're working with, and our congregation from a holistic perspective. And so I'm very excited about our panelists today and the conversation they're going to have on this topic. We want you to be engaged, and as I said, it's going to be a conversation. My job is to facilitate that conversation, and I'm going to turn it over right now to Reverend Jermine to lead us off. So here we go.
Well, hello. That was weak. Hello. All right. So, look at somebody and ask them this question: how are you doing? Now give them a response. Tell them how you're doing. Yeah. See, most of us will get that, oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. The limit is sometimes we're not fine. Sometimes we're not okay. But we get that can response because that's what's expected of us. To walk around as if we're too blessed to be depressed. You see, it's important that we understand why we've gathered here today. We've gathered here, as you can see, the objectives are clear. We want for you to gain knowledge about mental illness. We want you to decrease stigma and increase mental health literacy. We want to expand your view on mental illness. We want you to understand how you approach persons who are living with mental illness or maybe developing mental illnesses. And lastly, what tools do you need in order to do mental health ministry? You see, in this room, you are here in this image. Who are you? All these faces show up on Sunday mornings, Saturdays in our temples and in our churches and in our different faith spaces. I think, though, many times that this little person back there are many of the people who are living with mental illness, who don't know how to come out of the shadow and reveal their pain often and symptoms to us. You see, in Black churches, we need to have this education about mental illness for several reasons. One, a lot of people gather at the church. The church has been a gathering place for people over the centuries. It has a place of trust for many people. Often it's a place where people have minimal fear or suspicion. And it's often that familiar home. I know one thing, when I was growing up on Sunday morning, we was doing one thing, and that was going to church. Church was the most stressful Sunday. You would lose your shoe, lose something, have an argument, fuss, and all that stuff. And then when you get to church, they say, how you doing, brother pastor? And you just smile, everything's okay. No, you just had an argument before you walked in there. We'll put the smile on like everything's okay. And so what I want to do is talk about what is mental health versus what is mental illness. You see, we all should desire to have good mental health. It's an aim for all of us, as it is to have good physical health. But what happens is when we develop a mental illness, those symptoms begin to impact how we feel, impact how we function, our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior. Hopefully we all are striving for that sense of well-being. And mental illness has a way of interrupting that flow. I'm going to do a shout out here. How many Baptist folks do I have in the house? Oh, Baptist folks. How many American Methodist Episcopal Church do I have in the house? Oh, AME Church? Okay, okay. Methodists in the house. Amen. Hallelujah. All right. Episcopalian. All right. Catholic. Church of God in Christ. Pentecostal. All right. Seventh-day Adventists. All right. Jehovah's Witnesses. Speak up. Nation of Islam. Sunni Muslim. Other Muslim groups. Other African religions. These different faith traditions are often those that many African Americans are affiliated with. What's What's important to note, though, is each denomination, each, if you would, faction of the Christian thought has their own theological perspective when it comes to mental illness. Some would say that you should go to the doctor and get it treated. And some would say, just pray about it. Some would say, cast that devil out. Each different religious perspective has their own theology of how they deal with mental illness. And what I want to do is I want to increase your mental health literacy. I want to make sure you understand what mental illness is and how you can help. That's what mental health literacy is. It's about your knowledge, your beliefs, your abilities. And I want you to be able to recognize how you can help others manage and prevent mental health challenges. You see, the slide says problem, but I like the word challenge better. A problem gives the ideal that a person has to be fixed, but a challenge gives the ideal that it can be overcome. How many of y'all are overcomers out there? Come on, make some noise if you're an overcomer. Any folks of the beehive out there? I'm a survivor. All right, okay. Role plays, right? Role plays. All right. You see, many people are dealing with stigma. And that's why they won't talk about their mental health, because of the stigma. Stigma, in many ways, is almost like having astigmatism. It impacts how you see. It impacts how you view others. You see, sometimes we hear things like people who are dealing with mental illness are crazy, psycho, nuts, all these different negative things that we hear about. But I have a question I want to ask of you. I want you to think of the most derogatory thing a person could call you. Take a minute. Think of the most derogatory thing a person could call you. Now, replace that word, replace that phrase with the stigmatizing things we use to talk about people with mental illness. And that's how people feel. You see, what we want to do is we want to develop what is called person-first language. I train nurses in a program called Mental Health First Aid, and I often tell them all the time, when you talk about those you're serving, stop saying the pancreas in room 2. Isn't he more than the pancreas? Stop talking about the heart issue over there in room 5. Isn't he more than a heart problem? You see, person-first language is saying the person is not their illnesses. The person is not their disease. How would you like if I called you a bunion? You see, if we can move from this ideal of labeling people, because this is what this is. We have these apples here. Silly daddy, we're not disabled apples, we're apples with disabilities. You see, if I label the person, then we only see them as their illness, not as a person. Guy in the tree, help, it's Bigfoot. Bigfoot says, I'm not Bigfoot. I'm just a person with large feet. Once again, we want to make sure that we do not take people and make them other. Because often in the Hebrew scripture, and even in the New Testament, what was not understood was made other or demonized. Love the story about a man who had been put out of town, locked up in a cemetery, chained up, said he was self-injuring himself, said he had literally lost who he was. The people didn't know how to deal with him. Some of y'all know the story. Jesus shows up. And the first question that's asked is, what is your name? I believe that question humanizes this man. It restores his identity. I don't want to call you what people have called you. I want to know, what is your name? Ask your neighbor, what's your name? Come on, do it. Ask your neighbor, what's your name? Yeah. Now call them by their name. How humanizing is it when I can know your name and call you by your what? Your name. It's powerful when I can call you by your name. I'm moving on. I'm a preacher. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. You see, person-first language is when we move beyond calling folks schizophrenic and bipolar and calling them by their names. And by the way, if somebody tells you the weather is schizophrenic, tell them they are wrong. Weather cannot be schizophrenic. If they tell you the weather is bipolar, the weather is not bipolar. And if your friend tells you they are so OCD, ask them, as I ask my friends, this one question: do you have a diagnosis? It's amazing how we take on labels that we don't have. Nobody would dare walk around and say, oh, I'm so diabetic, child. No, you're not. And in my community, people say they have sugar and arthur. Those are not men. Those are diseases. Sugar diabetes, right? Arthur is arthritis. Notice here, I have bipolar disorder. I have depression. Notice, I have it, but it doesn't have me. You see, the statistics talk and tells us a story about why we need to be talking about this in our faith communities. Whether it's African American, whether it's Latino, whether it's Caucasian, whatever it may be, the study shows that people come to their faith leaders, notice here, 2 to 5 times, 44% to discuss about their mental health challenges. And if they are received the wrong way, it could be something that could damage them. Because often when they come to their faith communities, they're coming to a house of refuge. And when they can find no refuge in a place where God is supposed to be there, often many leave saying, where can I find refuge? You see, I think it's important that we also understand some more research that says 50% of those 18 to 29 years old say that prayer and Bible study could overcome mental illness. I'm going to tell them folks what my godmother would tell me. Baby, just keep on living. Because those who are in that 55 to 64 percentile, less than 30% said that. What are we saying here? We're saying here that there are persons who are living with mental illness who often are just wondering, will you call me my name and not my diagnosis? Here's a saying here. Someone said, I feel so alone at church. I invite people over for meals and try to make friends, but when they find out that I'm bipolar, they either preach to me about sin and healing or ignore me. Think about that. Either it's a sin, either I need to be healed, or either I need to be preached to. And that experience is not the experience of just one person, but often the experience of many. My faith perspective is Christian. 2 Corinthians talks about this ideal of a ministry of reconciliation. And I believe that as people of faith, our spirituality, that we should all seek out to be reconciled with those who often feel isolated and alone. To reconcile. To have a ministry of presence where we listen empathically to people and just be there. A ministry of reconciliation. I created this approach. How do you approach people? I created this approach. It's called a 3M approach. Meditation, mediation, and medication. Now, sometimes when I'm preaching, I'll say something like this. Can I get a witness? That's just me checking in to see if y'all with me. Can I get a witness somewhere out there? You with me? Oh, okay, all right. I just need a witness every once in a while. I know you're listening, but just a witness. All right, all right. Thank you. See, that does something right there. That does something for you. Amen. What is this ideal of meditation? Meditation is a spiritual discipline along with these other disciplines like reading, prayer, contemplation, hymns, and songs. Psalms 119 says, I will meditate on your precepts and regard your ways. Well, when I'm dealing with auditory hallucinations, it can be very difficult for me to meditate on anything. Imagine hearing unwanted voices that are not your voices, telling you to do things that you don't want to do. It can be very hard for me to meditate when I'm dealing with those symptoms. You see, mental illness is episodic. It occurs in episodes. Person can have an episode and then experience recovery. Episode, experience recovery. It's a journey. It's a journey. Person dealing with mania who may have these extreme highs, but then deal with depression and those extreme lows. I remember a person telling me, if they tell me to exercise one more time, we're going to have some issues. One more time. I know it releases endorphins, but one more time. If I could exercise, I would exercise. Just one more time. You see, in my tradition, when people get in trouble, we love to quote these things. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Then we get real deep. Psalm 23 says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, thou art with me. This right here is when people start shouting in the Pentecostal Baptist tradition. None of that, man. Weeping may endure for a night. Can I get a witness somewhere? But joy comes in the morning. People get real excited about that. What happens many times is people who are shouting and dancing in many of our churches are having a therapeutic release in church. Can I get a witness somebody? Okay. All right. Have you heard this one? There's a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There's a balm in Gilead to heal the sin sick. That's a hymn there. You heard that hymn before? I shall not be moved. Just like a tree planted by the waters, I shall not be moved. How about this? After you've done all you can, just stand, let God see you. My friends, all these things are good. But when you're in the thick of it, and you have a disease, and you have an illness, and you've done all you can, and you prayed all you could pray, and you've read all you can read, and you've done all you know how to do, and the symptoms are still present and won't go anywhere, we have to have more than just that approach of meditation. Another one here. Walk together, children. Don't get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. My friends, there's so many people who we're trying to get in the afterlife, but just want us to love them in this life. Precious Lord, take my hand. And our favorite for many, Amazing Grace. You see, many of these songs speak of a resiliency of a people who have gone through historical trauma. The trauma of slavery, the trauma of Jim Crow, the trauma of segregation. Speak of a people who had to rely on their faith to bring them through those times. And I would never say that faith, hope, confidence, and trust in God is not enough. But can you say, but there's more? Oh, I didn't hear you out there. But there's more. Thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all done ate them sandwiches. I know y'all sleepy. You know? Have you got to do some exercise in a minute? Some of my fellow preachers say, look at your neighbor, give him a high five. I won't go there, though. I won't go there, though. I won't go there, though. You see, this lady up here, I love her a whole lot. It's my mama. My mama's been now deceased, be 6 years, September 1st. Lived with serious depression and died at the age of 55 years old. My grandmother died at 81 years old. So I just knew I was going to have my mother around for a long time. Grandma was 81, Mama was 55 when she died. But research shows that those persons in the community mental health center, research was done in the community mental health center, that those persons with mental illness often die 25 years younger than those in the general population. And I'll never forget reaching out to a colleague, Dr. Joe Parks, who was the director of Medicaid at the time, calling Joe, who was part of that research, and said, Joe, your research just came alive. My grandmother was 81 years old. My mother, 55 years old. I never forget my mother was having an episode of psychosis. She thought somebody was coming after her. She thought somebody was going to get her. I did what a good son would do, a good preacher would do. I said, let's pray. Remember, that first approach is meditation. Those spiritual disciplines, let's pray. We prayed and we prayed and we prayed. I thought I had touched heaven. And after we got done praying, I said, Mom, how you feeling? She said, oh, I feel better. In my mind, I thought, yes. And then she uttered these words, but they still are going to get me. Wait a minute. We just prayed. We just touched heaven. We just had this spiritual moment here, and they're still going to get you. It was because in that moment, although prayer can be powerful and effective, in that moment, the prayer was not able to suppress or deal with the symptoms that she was experiencing in that moment. I would walk in sometimes and she would say, get out there, Will Jermine, you're a ghost. Who's the Will Jermine? Yeah. I took her to church one Sunday. If I could just get her to church. If I could just get her there. Brought her in the wheelchair, got her there, and that was Communion Sunday. I just thought, man, we can get her to church, Communion Sunday. She could hear the song, she loved to sing, direct choir. I just get her there. Communion was being passed around. And because of her suspicion, she would partake of the elements of communion. A tradition that she most definitely did Sunday after Sunday after Sunday for many years became foreign to her. What am I trying to say? Her faith was important to her. But in the throes of her episodes, her faith was something that in those moments, although I know she prayed a lot, she needed a mediator. She needed somebody who would intercede on her behalf. Somebody who would talk to doctors to make sure medications were proper. Somebody who would talk to therapists and make sure that she was getting the best help that she could get. My friends, sometimes you are called to stand in the gap for someone else. Sometimes we're called to be that intercessor, to be that mediator, to be that person who will stand in the gap, that third party. Sometimes the ministry of presence is not even saying a word, but just being present. Let me tell you, there's some words here that are so powerful. You ready for these powerful words? You ready? You are not alone. Now the problem when I say those 4 words, I start trying to sing Michael Jackson. You didn't go there with me? Those 4 words. You are not alone. Imagine if in our faith communities, in our African American communities, if we could just tell people, I'm here for you. I'll intercede for you. I'll stand in the gap for you. I'll go to the doctor with you. The intercessor. This whole idea of reconciling, being able to reconcile ourselves with those who are isolated, those people who are in the margins, those people who feel like no one cares. Reconciliation. How do I mediate? How do I reconcile persons back to faith communities? How do we do that? Notice here, and I got about a good 12, 15 minutes. Y'all all right there? All right. I'm just checking in. Because I'm feeling good up here, but I don't know how you feel. I'm feeling good. You're feeling all right? All right, all right. The R stands for respect. We should hold each other in a higher esteem than ourselves. What that means is you don't look down on your brother because they are in a lower place than you are in that moment. You hold each other in a higher esteem. You do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. That's respect. To respect each other. The E stands for engage. We should aim to establish a meaningful contact or connection with the other person. That begins by saying hello sometimes. I love on elevators, freaking out people. We'll get on there, everybody's tight on the elevator, just tight. Just tight. I'll go, hello, how's it going? He's startled. How's your day going? This guy actually is concerned about me and my day. Just saying hello, just to engage somebody, could be a way to reconcile yourself to a person. Confidence. We should appreciate others' vulnerabilities or qualities and not be threatened by them. Sometimes we'll say, that's the professional's job. That's not my job. I'm not supposed to be out there. I'm not supposed to be out there trying to help people. People are trained to do that. My friends, reconciliation is not about what you cannot do or what others can do. It's just being confident enough to esteem yourself to a person. I want you to say these words. You ready? Say, be the duck. I can't hear you say, be the duck. All right, now you say, what do you mean, be the duck? The duck on the water looks so graceful. But underneath, their little flippers are just going because they're trying to stay afloat in the water. Even if you are not confident, be the duck. You don't have to be confident, just appear confident. You will be amazed that you can have butterflies in your stomach. But if you just be the duck and appear to be confident, it can be very reassuring to somebody. But we have to be open-minded. We should be willing to consider new ideals and be unprejudiced. You know, I'm prejudiced. You want to know what I'm prejudiced against? These things called chitlins. Chitterlings, some people call them. My mother, God bless her, on one Thanksgiving brought me a plate with turkey and dressing and macaroni and cheese and greens and yams. I mean, it was looking good. But she made one fatal mistake. She put chitlins on my plate. Now, I grew up in a time when your parents said, you're going to eat what's on that plate, or you didn't get up from the table. I grew up in that time. Thankfully, that Thanksgiving, she had grace. Hallelujah, she had grace. I said, I don't want this plate. She said, I'll just take off the chitlins. I said, no, the juice has seeped and everything else. I don't want the plate. Now, you may say, what do you mean you're prejudiced against chitlins? Well, prejudice is when you have made a judgment about something or someone without an experience with that something or that someone. I have never eaten a chitlin in my life, but I have made a judgment about chitlins and never had experience. Why? I don't like where they come from. I don't like how they look. and I don't like how they smell. And you may say, you have never had that experience and you made a judgment. Yeah, I have. I'm prejudiced against chitlins. People say, let's try one. No, I'm prejudiced against chitlins. Now what happens every once in a while is an experience has to be snuck up on you. My auntie did that to me. She gave me this thing I thought was brisket. It was good. Had barbecue sauce on it. I tore it up. She came to me. She said, you know what you just ate? I said, what? She said, cow tongue. It was good, but I ain't had no more. Once I knew what it was, I was like, you can keep that to yourself, right? I was forced to have an experience. I was forced to have an experience that I would never have had. Sometimes people with mental illness, because 1 in 5 people in this country in any given year can have a diagnosis with mental illness. 1 in 5. You may be forced to have an experience with somebody that you never thought you would have. But it's how you respond. It's how you respond. We have to be open-minded and not take people and label them and say, you know what, I don't know how to deal with you. Be open-minded. Don't be prejudiced. If you're wondering, I'm still not going to eat chitlins. They keep telling me to fry them and put hot sauce on them, all that other stuff. I just don't know what to do about that. Maybe. I'm not negotiating. I'm not negotiating. We have to be negotiable when we are trying to reconcile ourselves with others. That means being open to discussion of modification. Sometimes in our faith communities, we have to modify theological positions to truly be able to embrace and help persons with mental illness. See, it's being creative, being willing to think outside the box. And if you can spell reconcile, you know there's an I and what else left? A-E. We must be what? Innovative. There's an I and an L and E. That's how you spell reconcile. Nobody corrected me. You're going to let me go out there with an I and an E. Okay. I, L, and E. We should what? Create new ideals and methods to solve the challenge. And we have to listen. We should hear things with thoughtful attention. And then lastly, we should be an encourager. We should inspire with courage, spirit, or hope, or each other. Spiritual disciplines are great. Being that intercessor is great. But sometimes people need medication. Those are the 3 M's. To have those spiritual disciplines like meditation, being the mediator. But sometimes medication is important. Let me ask you a question. How many of you all have ever been prescribed an antibiotic? Anybody? How many days were you told to take it for? 5? How many? 10? How many? 7? Okay, now let me ask you this question. How many of you follow the doctor's advice? Oh, some of y'all was compliant with medication, right? But how many of you all took it for 3 days, 4 days, and started feeling better, and then just stopped taking the medication? Anybody? That's often what happens with mental illness. People are prescribed medications, and they start feeling better. And they say, I don't need that medication anymore. I feel better. And then they start experiencing relapse. They start having symptoms again. If I can encourage all of you all as people, please don't tell somebody to stop taking their medication without first talking to their doctor. Let me tell you something. People come to me all the time, and there's something that we have in at least my faith tradition called testimony service. One of the worst things you can do in a church sometimes. What do you mean? Some of the stuff come out of people's mouth. Some of the stuff come out of people's mouth. And I've learned to say stuff like this. You can't tell it all. Sister, you can't tell it all. Brother, that's enough. People who testify, I stopped drinking cold turkey, and I haven't had a drink in 20 years. My friends, that's a miracle. Never never encouraged somebody just to stop drinking without some kind of withdrawal management. Medication is that. So here we have the stool here, right? The stool. Some of you all have seen a stool with just one pole there, and that one pole sustains the weight of the whole chair there. For some people, maybe meditation and spiritual disciplines is all you need. Maybe that's what's going to sustain you. But don't get mad because other folks may need somebody to stand the gap for them, or may need medication. You might need all 3 M's, or you might just need 2 M's. But be the supportful person that they need. If you was counting, I'm down to my last 2 slides if you didn't know. Can I get a witness again? Amen. Amen. All right. I'm liking that. I'm liking that. We got a crowd here. All right. All right. All right. There's 5 steps to start a mental health ministry. 5 steps to start a mental health ministry. The first step is to educate yourself. I'm the executive director of a work group called Pathways to Promise. Been around since 1988. Founded by 14 different denominations, Christian denominations, came together to create mental health literacy. On our website, pathwaystопроmise.org, we have an assessment tool that you can use to assess the need of your congregations, to find out what education needs you may have. The first step begins with assessing the need and then getting educated about that need. The second step is find other like-minded people who want to work with you to address the need of mental health in your congregation. The other thing is find out if your denomination has a statement already on mental illness. Find that out. The third thing is look for resources. There's NAMI. Is NAMI in the house? NAMI? All right. Now, there's NAMI. There's Mental Health America. There's all kind of resources that we just don't know about. So look for resources. Join those organizations. Don't feel like you have to reinvent something. Take advantage of what's already there. But step number 5 is very important, and that is be prepared to nurture your ministry. It takes care. It takes you to provide that care for it. I'm going to conclude with this statistic here. Did you know that 70% of young people say mental health stigma has made them less likely to talk about their mental health challenges to others? 70%. My son, in November of 2016, attempted suicide. Not once, but on several occasions. I'm thankful that he's still here with us and that he's living in recovery. It was the scariest thing for my wife and I because that same year, 3 of his friends died by suicide in his high school. And our son was just dealing with those symptoms. What happened in my household that we didn't recognize that our son was having warning signs of suicide. It wasn't a secret. I had a magnet on my refrigerator for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. The magnet was right next to the Pizza Hut magnet. I made it that known. If you're in distress, call the number. What happened is that so many times as people, we don't hear people. They're talking to us, but we don't hear what they're saying to us. And because we can't hear them, we don't engage them. And because we don't engage them, we can't learn what's going on with them. And then we cannot plan with them. My colleague, Rose Jackson Beavers, asked me, Jermaine, I wrote this book called Bottled Up Inside, African American Teens in Depression. I want you to read it for me. And I read it and I said, maybe you should change this, maybe you should add this, maybe you should modify this. And she said, why don't you just rewrite it with me? And I said, let's do it. And in May of this year, we released this book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. This book here, we released it so that other parents and other persons could know what depression is, what trauma is, how spirituality can be a protective factor, and how can you help young people who are living with symptoms of mental illness. Here's the key message. Recovery is possible. Can you all say that with me? Recovery is possible. Recovery looks different for all people, but recovery is possible. Recovery is a journey. Recovery is linked to this thing called resiliency, the ability to snap back. My colleague, Dr. Keely Petty, is going to talk about this concept of resiliency and self-care. So I'm going to conclude this piece here. This right here is information about Pathways to Promise, the website. And I pray that our tech folks got her PowerPoint ready to go when I click this next button. Well, let's get her up. Let's get hers up in a moment there. All right, yes. So it is 12:55. We're going to go up to about 1:30. And then at 1:30 to 2 o'clock, we're going to take all your questions you may have for us. So I thank you so much for your attention, especially after lunch. I did good after lunch. Now, it's dark in here. I can't see y'all. Y'all might be asleep, but I didn't hear no snoring. I didn't hear no snoring, so I think we're good. Dr. Vinny. Let's give her a round of applause, everybody.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, I'm clicking. Y'all get up and stretch a bit. I can hear knees cracking and hips popping. Those are mine. Ah, okay. Come on, stretch. Reach. Bend. Arouse yourself. All right. Now look at the person next to you and ask them, are you all right? Tell them, hang on, hold on. Our responsibility today is to talk about the African American church and the impact that mental health has on the African American and the church. It's interesting that those two have been correlated and combined, and my responsibility or assignment today is to talk to you about what is resiliency. I'm looking out in the room and we're talking about African Americans because African Americans have a love for the church. African Americans go to church a lot because we love church, and it's one of the fulcrums that exist within community, and it is a safe place of refuge where other places are not within the African American community. We have to talk about African Americans and mental health because there is a combined thing that's going on in the African American community with mental health because there's a huge substance abuse component. In the African American community, we have economic issues that are not present in other communities. But the stigma and the issue of mental health is the same, whatever your race or your ethnicity is. Amen, somebody? Y'all gonna stay up, okay? This is good. And if you know an African American, what you need to do next year is invite them to come here. Invite your pastors. Invite persons that you know. You're here, but your neighbors aren't. Maybe some of your friends aren't. And you need to bring them here because this is a human issue. I live my life by a mantra that Mother Teresa says, and this is what she says, Pastor. She says, if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to one another. I believe we're here today because some of us have grasped that idea that, you know what, I belong to this issue of mental health. It might not be me, but it might be my neighbor. It might be my friend's child. It might be somebody within the community that I live in, work in, or serve that has a mental health issue. So if we don't have peace in regards to this issue, it is because we have forgotten. And you know, if you forget too much, you're going to be labeled as somebody with a mental health issue. Am I right? But Mother Teresa was dead on. She said, if, because it's possible that each and every one of us can forget that we belong to one another. It's a humane thing. It's part of being human. You don't have to have an afro like me. We belong to each other, which speaks to the sense that we should care about one another, which takes us to this word resiliency. And I correlated the scripture, Psalms 34 and 18, that says that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. How many of you will tell the truth today and say, I have been brokenhearted? And did you do everything right when you were brokenhearted? Did you? Did you drink too much? Did you sex too much? Did you gossip too much? Don't go to sleep on me. Put them chips down. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. Every one of us have had a broken heart. And some people's brokenness takes them beyond a level that they even thought was possible. They didn't even know that was possible. And they never come back. So we call them names. You're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. You're dumb. You're stupid. You're crazy. That's Crazy Jack walking down the street. You've seen Crazy Jack or Silly Susie, and you didn't do anything to try to find out why is she in this. You may have even laughed. Can we tell the truth? Come on. Can we tell the truth? So resiliency is the ability to rebound or spring back. Where my sisters at? You know what a girdle do for you? Helps you bounce back, right? Hello, where my sisters? I can't see y'all out there. If y'all out there, snap and say, oh yeah. You know, a girdle is the thing that gives you and restores your resiliency. And men, don't be laughing because they got them for y'all too now. Spanx for men. It gives you back what you thought you lost. So when we look at this word resiliency, it is simply an ability to rebound or to spring back. It is to identify. It is to use and to manage resiliency. It's a management system within you. And it's a management system that you can plug in and partner and collaborate with others to ensure that you're bouncing back and you're springing back properly in positive ways. To do what? To relieve stress, to communicate effectively, to have empathy with others and overcome challenges and diffuse conflict. Resiliency. Can you say that word? Resiliency. Come on, say it with some authority. This is an authority word. Resiliency impacts many different aspects of your daily life and those who have mental health in ways that changes the way people behave and changes the way that people think. But I want you to be mindful that people who are dealing with resiliency aren't dumb and stupid as you may think. I'm reminded of a movie called The Beautiful Mind. Anybody see that movie, A Beautiful Mind? And one of the things in that movie that I never ever forgot, he had gone through psychiatric help and started having these visitations that I call early in college, but was brilliant. You must know that people who have mental health issues are not dumb, stupid, ignorant people. There are brilliant people inside of people who are struggling with mental health issues, and they just have to get around somebody who's resilient enough to pump that greatness out of them. So here he's won the Nobel Peace Prize for incredible mathematic abilities and skill sets, and one of his colleagues asked him, hey, do you still up when they're in the terrible 2 stages. You hear them, but you did not do what? You didn't respond to them. So are you mentally ill? So when we look at resiliency studies, and studies are important because resiliency can have a profound effect on people's ability to be creative and be rewarded and have satisfying relationships. Why do we think people with mental illness don't deserve to have a lover and be loved and be affectionate and be in relationship? Why do we think that people with mental illness belong isolated and over in a corner somewhere without having to experience the need for resiliency, even if I am in an episodic state of confusion and lacking clarity? Why do we think that? If you're taking notes, write that down. Why do I think they don't deserve that? Don't you deserve it? Hello, hello? Talk, you know. So resiliency, it leads to greater productivity. It reduces stress, anxiety, and higher levels of performance and a greater sense of teamwork. And this word I like, camaraderie, and all critical components of a successful, productive lifestyle. If there are mental health issues present, it does not deter one from having a healthy and a productive lifestyle. You know, we laugh at people who have mental health issues as though they are handicapped and they can't do anything. But I would venture to say the one who thinks that they got it all together mentally may need to take a note from the person who is struggling with mental health. Amen, somebody? Clap like that was good to you. Come on. When we look at resiliency, there are 4 areas that need to be looked at. There are consist of 4 core skills that are paired up under 2 primary competencies. So when you talk about resiliency, let me say this, you are talking about a competency. You are talking about what one sees and what one does. When we frame that around mental health, it is about what they are seeing and then what they are doing. It is about personal competence, and it leads to social competence. I spoke about the isolation earlier. It's about personal competence has to do with self-awareness and self-management. And this is where you and I come in when we are working and lending our lives to persons who have mental health issues or severe depression. How many of you been depressed? Raise your hand. You ever been depressed? Well, you ought to be grateful that you came back, because some people spiral down into a depression and they never ever come back, because every one of these mental issues that we're talking about has a voice. God did everything he did with a voice, with his voice. And this is what's happening to people with mental health. They are hearing things and seeing things that need to be managed. And part of that management may have to do with how we begin to care and have concern, so that we have that peace that I mentioned earlier in that quote from Mother Teresa. So the social competence deals with social awareness and then relationship management. All of these get messed up in persons who have mental health issues. I heard somebody say, well, your issue is now my issue. So persons who have mental health issues, and you are, if it's a spouse or a loved one or a child, those issues do become your issues. Not that you become mentally ill as though they are, but that has an effect on your humanity. So I want to talk about 9 things that resilient people won't do. And I hope you're taking notes so that at the end of our time, you'll be able to ask questions that you can then go back into your community, into your safe place, into your job. You know why people go on their jobs, have worked on a job for years and years and years, and come back, and you've heard the term go postal. Anybody heard that term? Because they had a mental health issue, and it didn't manifest until they got fired. It didn't manifest until the wife walked out. It didn't manifest until the husband left. It didn't manifest the child came and told the mother, I am a boy, but I'm really a girl. Some of these mental health issues are not going to manifest until there's an impact in your life, until there's an impact in your community that literally shapes your world. But what resiliency does is shapes your world. So when we talk about resiliency, 9 things very quickly, and I'm not going to read all of this. You have eyes. I believe you are persons of understanding. While I'm talking, you can be reading. I'm going to jet through this because I am excited about the questions that hopefully you are taking notes so that you can ask. There is an expectation after this conference that you go back in your community and you become a mental health navigator and decide that if these things are manifesting in your community, you're not going to wait on somebody else to do something about it. You are going to be the change agent within your community, within your family. You're going to stop talking about your uncle that you know is mental, and you're going to begin to do something. Quit waiting on him to die to get the inheritance. Come on, somebody. But you're going to do something about it. Because like a Mother Teresa, if there is no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to one another. Before I get started, I want you to look to the person to the left or to the right. And for those of you who kind of ain't nobody on the left or right, find somebody and look at them. And just take note of who's sitting next to you today. We don't know who's in here today, who's battling, who's taking 5 and 10 pills a day just to stay sane. We don't know. You look good. You're smiling. I see all 3 of your teeth. But what if something's going on and because you are at the top of your game professionally, you can't tell anybody that I'll lose my job. If I tell my husband, he's already looking at 36, 24, 36, and I'm about a 38, 48, 50. So how do we deal with this issue of resiliency? Number 1, people who are resilient, and it's going to take you to be resilient to help persons who are dealing with mental health issues. Number 1, they won't let anybody limit their joy. If you are a resilient person, you don't let circumstances, you don't let anything limit your joy. When your sense of pleasure and satisfaction are derived from comparing yourself, you won't even compare yourself. You are no longer the master of your own happiness. When emotionally intelligent people feel good about something that they have done, they won't let anybody's opinion. Why am I saying that? Because nobody's opinion matters when you are lending a hand to someone who just may need a guide. Where can I go to have proper counseling? Second, they won't forget. Resilient people are quick to forgive, but that doesn't mean that they don't forget. You forgive. How many? I forgive you, but I'm not going to forget. Well, if I were to go scripture on you, it's one thing I want God to show me. And there's this sea called the Sea of Forgetfulness. And the Bible says that everything that we've done against God, he takes our sin. Sin are the things that he does not like, whether we put laws and do whatever we do. And he says they're thrown into a sea of forgetfulness. And I want to see what that sea looks like, not to be nosy and see what he has thrown in there, but I just want to know what that looks like. I have a visual curiosity about that. So resilient people are quick to forgive, but that doesn't mean that they forget. I want to be the person that can forgive and forget, because I would guarantee people who have not been able to forget are replaying pain and harm and hurt over and over again, which can then lend itself to mental illness. They won't die in the fight. How many of you feel like I'm in a fight right now? I'm in a fight. Come on, get your paws up. Put your paws up like the young folks say. You in a fight. You're in a fight for what? Your health. You're in a fight for your where my finance people? You're in a fight because your change ain't, your money's funny and your change is strange. Hello, where you at? Don't be shy. I'm not going to ask you for no money. But you're in a fight. I'm in a fight to lose weight. I'm in a fight to try to find some help for this person in my family who's mentally disabled. I'm in a fight to keep my marriage. I'm in a fight to keep my weight down. Now I know every hand up right there. Come on. I'm in a fight. Remember that girdle I told you about, that resilient thing? But you don't die in the fight because you know how important it is to live and to fight another day on the behalf of somebody else. You understand that I'm not fighting alone, and I'm not fighting for myself. And resilient people understand that. Fourthly, you won't prioritize perfection. Sometimes many of us won't do a thing because it's got to be just right. You know, you comb your hair over and over and over. You might have a mental issue because it might be all right, but you just that one strand just over and over, because resilient people won't set perfection as their target because they know it doesn't exist. Perfection does not exist. The Bible says we will not see or know perfection until we see Jesus Christ. So human beings by our own very nature are fallible. And these fallible areas are what cause us to have breakdowns. And I know that this is true because when perfection is your goal, you're always left with a nagging sense of failure. Is that anybody here? You know, maybe not now, but ever, never? Raise your hand. Fifthly, they won't live in the past. Failure can erode your self-confidence and make it hard to believe you'll achieve a better outcome in the future. I tell you what, there's a power in believing that although you are in this mental state now, I have a belief that one day I'll get back to the real you. I'll know the real you aside from this mental health issue. And that's the day that I'm waiting to see. That's the day that I'm living for. Is that anybody in the audience? If so, y'all clap it up. Come on, clap it up. Then they won't dwell on problems. You know, it's there, but we can't dwell and focus our whole life around that. When you are focused on an action to better oneself and your circumstances, you create a sense of personal efficacy. How many of you know what efficacy is? Efficacy is the power to produce an effect. That's what happens. You won't dwell on those problems because you understand a sense of personal efficacy to do something about what you see. That's all pretty much we're saying. Do something about what you see. Do something about what you see. Look at your neighbor and say, do something about what you see. Resilient people won't dwell on problems because they know they're most effective when they focus on solutions. And that's why this conference is going on. This is a solution-based conference. 7, they won't hang around negative people. Sometimes you go to help people and you got people, well, why are you messing with them? You know they crazy. Anybody know what I'm talking about? They not gonna change. They always been that way. They mama was that big mama was that way. Rosarita was that way. Hello? So complainers are bad news because they wallow in problems and fail to focus on solution. Have any of you had one solution that you can grab hold to and take out of here and begin to implement? Number 8, they won't hold grudges. Where are my grudge holders? You're making yourself sick. Grudge holders, that you're holding on to negative emotions that come with holding on to a grudge, is actually a stress responder. And what is happening, you are leaking negativity into your system and literally creating a grudge match in your mind. A grudge match. Who you got a grudge with? Who's holding grudges? I feel it over here. I feel it over there. I feel it up there. Who's holding grudges? You 58 years old and you just holding a grudge. Hello, somebody. You're holding a grudge. Ninthly, they won't say yes unless they really want to. How many of you know there's power in no? No, I don't have the emotional capacity to do anything about that, but I can refer you. No, I'm not going to do that because the last time I did that, I was in the sunken place too long. Anybody? So no, I need to be resilient. And resiliency says that I'm not going to say yes when I really want to say no. How many of you have said yes to some things, and after you said, you already knew internally, I should not have got that man's phone number. I should have left Buster alone. Hello, hello, hello. They won't say yes unless they really want to. Do you have a yes in you today when you leave here? Don't lie now. I mean, really think about this. Do you have a yes inside of you? Hold on, can I finish? Do you have a yes inside of you? Not to try to take on this issue or tackle it all by yourself. Did you meet somebody here? Can you collaborate? Can you partner with somebody? Can you go visit an African American community church and sit in there and just enjoy the view and maybe see how you can be part of the peace that's needed, not only in that church, but maybe in your own church, because we are talking about the church. And the church ought to be a safe place. It's so sad that what's happening in the Catholic Church, it's been happening for a long time. But I would believe that a lot of that sexual trauma is happening because there are mental health issues among the priesthood. Don't shoot me down. But I do, that's what I believe. And it's clothed behind the pontiff and the vicar. It's clothed behind the robe. But there are a lot of mental health issues that manifest in a whole lot of different ways. So can you make a promise to yourself that you won't say yes unless you really want to? Did you just come to this conference because you didn't have anything to do? The lunch was free? Or did you come because you really have a concern about doing something about the mental health issues that you are seeing in your community? Matthew 11 and 28. This is not just for those with mental health issues, but this is for you. The text says, "Come to me all who are wearied and burdened." Anybody wearied and burdened? You know, the wrong kind of pump can make you wearied and burdened, ladies. The wrong tie, gentlemen, can make you burdened when you're going on an interview and you don't even get it because your tie was weary and burdened. But Jesus said this, "Come to me and I will give you rest." He's the most resilient entity that we can have in our lives. I want to recommend some books to you that have literally transformed my life and have transformed the lives of people all over the world. Very quickly, here they are. They deal with emotions and resiliency. Sometimes these words go hand in hand. And then lastly, "This is who I am. This girl is on fire." Thank you for your time. That's my time. Clap it up.
Hey, why don't you go back one more slide? Let's go back.
Oh, the book one more time. Okay. How you go back? Okay.
Y'all want to see that, don't y'all? You want our picture. got it?
No?
Let me move out the way.
Okay.
You got it?
You're welcome.
All right. Let's give Dr. Keeley another round of applause, please. All right. Moderator, yes.
Mike, is it on? Oh, awesome. Now, we told you it was going to be a conversation, and this is the part where you actively participate in this workshop. We have a microphone, I believe, that's set up over here to my left, to your right. And if you just want to come up and ask a question, or if you feel you have a large enough teacher voice that you can say it out loud and clear, they're here to answer your questions. So please, who will be the first? Not all at one time.
I have a teacher's and a preacher's voice, I think.
Okay.
So I guess my question is, as we talk about people that we're trying to work with or reach out to, the difficult part, and there's probably not a good answer to this, the difficult part is someone who used to know Christ and no longer chooses to accept him. Someone who used to take meds and now they think they're fine and no longer take their medication. And they're just on a different planet. And in a dark place. And what do you do about that? Because they have to choose it.
Now you meet them where they are. You meet them where they are. In the Hebrew scripture in Amos, prophet says, how can two walk together unless they agree? A Berean Study Bible says, how can two walk together except they have an appointment? And I like that translation because the reality is that you have to meet folks where they are, and sometimes people don't want your help. And you have to be okay with people saying, I don't want your help. Your response should be, if you can make this commitment, is when you want my help, I'll be there. When we say recovery is possible, it's a very true statement. When my mother passed away, I thought, well, where was the recovery in that process there? Now, I believe in an afterlife, so therefore I believe that she's going to be made whole and she's going to be fine and she's well and so forth. So that's my hope. But for that person who has walked away from the faith, walked away from medication, and just in a realm of their own, as you said, we have to realize that mental illness is episodic. So there are those lucid moments where they may be in a place where they can hear what you have to say. And so just being available to be able to say, just give me a holler when you're ready. That could be what you do. But the reality is that everyone doesn't want our help. And we have to respect that and be able to be present when they need us to be present. Does that answer your question to some degree? All right. You want to add more to that?
I was just thinking, you mentioned two things, that they walked away from God. Did you say that? And the second thing was?
Medication.
They left their medication. Those are things that you can encourage them to stay with. But the Bible does talk about those who have fallen by the wayside. And some of that fallenness is choice. Now, if you have medications and you need to take medications and you're not taking the medications and you have left the faith, then that means that the sufficiency that person believes is within themselves, but you see something, you see the harm and the detriment. But until the eyes of their understanding are open to those things that you see, they will be in the state that they're in. And as Pastor said, when they get ready for that reconnection with their relationship with God and to get back on those meds, then that's when they'll see their turnaround. It's very sad and it's very hard because we can read scripture about people falling by the wayside, but it's another thing when we know people that have fallen by the wayside.
Let's be clear about medication. Medication can have some side effects that make you not want to take it. And sometimes it may be the dosage, it could be the type of medication. And so if they've stopped taking their medication and they're not complying with medication, it may be important to ask them, why did you stop taking that medication? Well, it makes me sleepy. It makes me lethargic. I'm picking up weight. I'm just not who I want to be anymore. Well, if you can see your doctor, go to a clinic, maybe they can lower the dose, maybe they can give you another medication. So it's important to find out the why. And then if there can be a resolution, then walking with them to do that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious about the impact of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and mental health, and what resources exist for families who are addressing this, and also are there correlations between economics and mental illness?
Can you explain for those persons who may not know about the ACEs study, kind of just briefly what you're referring to?
The adverse child experiences? So basically, when you endure a series of childhood experiences that are negative, they indicate that if you have a score of 4 or more, and most people, amazingly, do have scores of 4 or more, children have a higher tendency, and it exists throughout life, that you may have, you're prone to certain physical illnesses, shorter lifespans, emotional issues, that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering what's the correlation. And also, I really am interested in, I know that people in lower incomes often don't get the kind of mental health assistance they need. So what information do you have about that, and what resources might be available to us?
I wanted you to explain that because some people don't know certain acronyms or certain studies and so forth. And we're talking about childhood trauma and the impact of childhood trauma on the life of individuals, and how once that risk factor is present, it could lead to persons developing mental health problems or mental health challenges and so forth. And so here's an important thing that I want you to learn how to say. You ready? I don't know. When you don't know, be honest and say what? I don't know. Okay? So I don't know the resources that are here in San Antonio or in the state of Texas, but I'm sure maybe some of our, so you want to answer that question?
Yeah, every case you have to look at it individually. And we start looking at any type of research, and being actually an educator that is involved in a lot of research, you have to look at it in which the context in which it was conducted. Here in San Antonio, I shared yesterday with the populations that we have, a large Hispanic population, the concepts of resiliency, the things that people have had to endure, it varies along the spectrum. There is no one specific answer, as he said, I don't know. But as healthcare providers, mental health care providers, you need to work with that individual specific person, knowing that there's some generalities out there that maybe you can conclude from the research, but how will you work with Marquita, with my specific issue, my specific background, my demographics related to SES, education, all those variables come into play. There is no one set answer, no one set cure for every person, because it's going to be based on the individual. So you can't give just a set answer.
Yeah, there's some training called trauma, there's some work around trauma-informed congregations, making sure congregations are informed of the impact of trauma. And so when we have faith leaders and faith members who are informed of the impact of trauma and what trauma has, then trauma is about any perceived thing that could have been dangerous or threatened the person's well-being. It could be trauma. So for instance, if I fell off this stage, that could be traumatic for me and for you because you witnessed that, right? And some of you may be like, I just can't get that out of my head. He fell off the stage. Now, I'm gonna stay right here so that doesn't happen. Okay? But watching the news, you can have vicarious trauma. Just watching things in the news. So I think the answer to the question, of course, is that's the importance of mental health ministry. Doing the research and knowing what resources exist in your community, the community mental health centers, the federally qualified health centers, the clinics, find out what exists in the community and making those connections.
Yeah, and I would say, number one, the Center for Healthcare Services, who has, if it's San Antonio Metropolitan Health does a complete training on adverse childhood experiences. And to your question about African American communities, I would say any community where there's stress, where there is high crime, where there are gang banging issues, where there are poverty, systemic poverty, low economic housing, those areas you may find that there are higher levels of mental health, but unless there are surveys done to fully find out, I would say yes. I would say poverty lends itself to many other mental health issues.
It does, but I will say too, mental health is in all spectrums.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will make an assumption that you'll have more just because it's a lower SES.
Right.
When in reality, it's more camouflage than some of the more privileged. And I will follow up with that too. There's a directory that's put out by United Way that has every resource imaginable in that directory, nonprofit, for service, dealing with mental health, dealing with a variety of different types of resources. And I would urge you to look at that as a guide.
And call
Actually, I was
211.
asking about resources. I wasn't implying that there was, and I wasn't specifically talking African American. I was talking about low-income communities throughout the country. So I was asking for resources.
Yeah, United Way directory. That would be a really great one.
Yes.
I guess my question is more related to stigma. I think a lot of times sometimes in the African American community, there's this feeling that you have to be strong. You always have to be strong. So if you have that thought process in your head that you have to be strong for everyone in your family, in your community, and then you have a strong faith foundation, and let's say you do have an episode of depression, and so now you're dealing with this feeling of shame and guilt because you're thinking, well, I'm a person of faith. I shouldn't be going through this. How do you help those people deal with those feelings of shame or guilt that may come because they feel like the pressure that's been put on them, that they need to be strong, that they should be, people of faith don't have those kind of issues?
There's a movement that has this phrase, I think it's a powerful phrase, and that phrase is, it's okay not to be okay. Google that. It's there. It's okay not to be okay. It's a movement there with that. And I think we have to share those words with our friends, our neighbors. It's okay not to be okay. I think that we have to also encourage folks, if they really have read the Bible, it's full of a bunch of messed up people. I mean, jacked up people. And what makes them able to deal with their jacked up selves is their relationships with who they call to be God. All right? So the Bible allows no perfect families. Even Jesus told his mom something that just messed me up. Said, woman, I would have got beat up right there. Woman, didn't you know I was about my father's bill? I thought, what in the world is going on here, right? There are no perfect families allowed in the scripture for a reason. It's a book written about people and their experiences with God. So let your friends, your family members, colleagues know that there is not an expectation of living without error or perfection or not being weak, but the reality is we all experience that, and it's okay not to be okay. I think that's important that people know that. Does that answer your question to some degree?
But can I add another little piece to that as well? You know, as an African-American female, like you said, all the various pressures that you have on you, it's great to find that good support network. If you can find it, find it. Hopefully through this conference, we can get trained more paraprofessionals to help you find the resources. But I will tell you sometimes, and I have a PhD in counseling, I need a sister to talk to. I need someone I can sit down and have that conversation about my struggle from being a female, being an African-American female, being in higher education, all those variables. And so having that connection and support system, you've got to find it because you are going to be stressed. You're going to need that kind of support. And you want to get it from the right sources as well, too. Not someone that's going to give you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And you need to find that in your community in some form or fashion, whether it's in your church, your sister group, or even, again, just reaching out to others. And my information is in the program. I can try to help find you someone that can maybe help you answer some of those questions.
Yeah, I like that approach of professional help, but also support groups from one another. So I think being open to share your struggles and then find people who are like-minded in support groups. And those can be formal, organized support groups that exist out there. And sometimes it is a phone call to a friend. Yes?
There are many wonderful lists out there that provide support groups that are available, but I often find myself at a loss to find even a single one that is a volunteer mental health care ministry specifically for the incarcerated, because they are in desperate need of it. There's a national initiative to reform prison ministry and prison in general. But I find that volunteers are coming and they are lay people, they are untrained people, they may be an accountant, an engineer, and these things are not very helpful for the incarcerated who need mental health care ministry.
Yeah, we know that the prison system is the largest provider of mental health care, and not good mental health care. So the largest provider of mental health care is in our prison system. And, the reality is that it starts with education. And educate those persons who want to lend a hand, who want to help out, and give them that mental health literacy to be able to at least be that gap, that stand in the gap, those mediators until professionals can show up, because there is more need than there is resources. And we need to encourage more young people to go into the field of psychology, to go into the field where they can become clinicians and therapists, because there's a shortage even there. So it starts with educating our young people to say it's okay to be a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. It's okay to pursue those kind of careers.
Counselors and social workers too.
Social workers, LCSW,
Counselors.
yes, counsel, yeah. So I don't have an answer per se to the question, but I do believe it begins with education and encouraging people to get educated to provide that help.
I had one wanted to say something. Were you Dr. Duffy?
Thank you for your question.
I was just thinking about what somebody asked a little earlier about what do you do when somebody has gotten off their medicine and used to be close to God and then wasn't at that point. And I just had some thoughts and feelings about that, because it may be that it's good, but it may be that it's really not. And so to start with choice feels to me like it might move us out of a place of compassion and might take us someplace we don't need to be. I think the answer of just don't know, and it's very hard, and you do your best, but maybe not even put a lens on it yet, might be what I would say, because we can't say that it's a choice. That's not what common from care would say.
Just another community resource, if you don't know, that's Dr. Thelma Duffy. She's the department chair of counseling at University of Texas, San Antonio, and also past president of American Counseling Association.
I think also it's important that when you talk to people, and when you start saying the word should, stop it. Tell somebody, stop it. If you don't know why we're asking you to call and respond in the African American tradition, we believe in call and response. When we say something, you say something back. That's what that was, just in case. She was like, why do you keep talking to us about say something back? That's kind of that. Okay. But oftentimes, when you start off saying, well, you should see a doctor, you should take your medication, you should do that, you are now moving in the realm of advice. What you might do is say, maybe you could. And could becomes information. So I often tell people, avoid shoulds and look at what could happen. Those could be things, information that people can use. We have like a lot of people there. Yes.
I have a friend, and we've been very close for quite a while, a few years. Her grandfather committed suicide a few months ago, and her dad is not always around. And I worry about her because
That's a heavy burden to carry, just you alone. But I can tell the love you have for your friend, and you won't hurt it, get help. Let's do that. Let's talk. Make sure you hang around so we can talk to you, so we can help you. Because the key thing is to encourage your friend to seek help if she's having depression or some anxiety. So let's try to make sure we talk with you before. Thank you for sharing.
And I want to thank you for your courage, your courage for coming up. And as she walks away, there are many resources too. The first thing is connecting with the school counselor, because that's their job to make sure that our students are successful, but they're also trained to know what other resources that are out there, and also what resources you need as well, because again, as he said, that's heavy, and I can tell that you're really feeling for your friend, and we want to make sure you're taken care of too in that process. So.
Good morning or afternoon. So I just wanted to make a comment first that this is so needed. So I'm a mother who has a son diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I kind of think back to my first experience with the church, where when I first started to notice signs, and I went to the church, and the first thing they told me was just say what the Bible says about your son. Speak those scriptures, and I'm thinking that's it. And there was nothing else, to follow that. So I think it's important that the church has a better understanding, like you said, the 3 M's. So that's important because it's not just about prayer. And I think there's a book out, that says, The Church Youth They're Wounded, something to that effect. Because we go to the church looking for help, and that's what we get. I'm a licensed counselor, so I've learned some things over a period of time, but I wasn't at that time. And the other point is self-care, because oftentimes those caregivers, how strenuous that is to care for a person who's diagnosed with a mental illness. It's exhausting. And oftentimes you'll have those caregivers who actually walk alone. They don't come out, of the shadows. So I do want to give a shout out to NAMI, because I did reach out to NAMI after that happened, and they showed me how to be resilient. They taught me how to be empowered. They taught me how to make some choices for myself, because you can't help them if you're not strengthened for yourself. So I wanted to make that comment and to say I really commend and thank you for what you all are doing. Can I say one more thing? I use at my church, I call it an educational moment. When people say things like cray-cray, when they say things like God is not schizophrenic, when they say things like that, I lift my hand and say, can I just take a moment? This is an educational moment to kind of teach them some things that they just don't know. Yeah. So thank you for your time.
I would say to you, it sounds like you would be the perfect person to set up a mental health ministry within that church, so that you could provide the education on language and just the information that you've learned, and begin to provide that service within the church. That the church, again, is a resource, and if that church had a ministry of mental health, kind of like Celebrate Recovery, because all walks of people walk into the church.
Absolutely.
And you've got to have subgroups or small groups that can help strengthen and facilitate exactly what you're talking about. So I would say that maybe that would be something you could consider doing to inform the congregation as well as leadership. Sometimes pastors, because they're not skilled in those areas, they know the Word of God, and that's what they're going to give you, because they may not even have an understanding about this realm of mental health. So don't be mad at them. They just don't know.
Not mad at them. I learned a lot of things over the years.
They don't know. But maybe you should consider doing that and then model the program throughout the churches here in San Antonio. That may be something really, really you'd like to consider.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
wanted to thank you for bringing up the ACEs score and talking about disparity and how that can affect individuals and trauma. My question is, when it comes to talking about medication, it just feels like it is a very, very strong message out there. I love how it's implemented sometimes as a first line of defense. What I feel in the field sometimes is we forget about trauma. And I don't think my thought process would be that way had I not heard like over 500 people's stories through different trainings. So I've grown a lot in that. I'm wondering how we can, ways to change the conversation from how do we heal from trauma versus mental illness at times.
I can take that on, you can take it on.
Well, as I was listening to your question, it went so many different ways in regards to the medical model versus a strength or wellness-based model. Going first to medication, right? And how counseling differs in some cases than other professions because we're more wellness strength-based. When you're talking about trauma and mental illness and just again the words that we're using, how we embrace that as professionals versus paraprofessionals or skilled helpers is going to vary. I guess is my quick answer to that. Just the pharmaceutical piece, prescriptions period, doctors are prescribing drugs left and right, let alone with mental illness. And so trying to get a handle on that totally as far as medications, sometimes it's needed. But when and what cases, it's, again, to me, always the individual. So that's just my quick answer. I was just thinking a lot of different things as you were asking your questions, perfectly honest.
And I think a lot of people don't even realize what they have experienced is traumatic. And so just the concept of what trauma is needs to be explained to many people. Because people often live in environments that have always been that way. Mm-hmm. And so because it's always been that way, they don't know that there's something wrong. I'm sorry. Wrong is a value-laden word. Mm-hmm. But there's something that should be, they don't know this is not how it should be. Right. And they just accept it as being their norm. And so I think that when people can understand what you are experiencing has had an impact on your wellness. And that impact on your wellness has impacted you probably not only physically, but also your mental well-being. And so I think the language, and the word mental illness can be very stigmatic by itself. And what we want to be able to say, listen, it's your mental well-being, it's your mental health that you want to be concerned about. So we have 8 minutes. 8 minutes. So any other questions? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that resource. And I also will say that in San Antonio, area code 207, which is the poorest, supposedly, zip code in San Antonio, we do have a community counseling center that is on General McMullen as well. That fee is based on a sliding scale, but again, depending on your income, there's some other resources out there.
And I think we need to make sure, don't forget your questions, please. We have to make sure we change the perception of what therapy is. So it's not Bob Newhart. It's not like going and laying on the couch and telling the therapist all your problems. All right? It's not that. And so I think a lot of people don't really understand what therapy is, or what cognitive behavior therapy is, or don't know what it is. So it's important. A lot of folks go to WebMD, though, and start looking up their symptoms and then start self-diagnosing. So don't do that either, because when you go to the doctor, you're saying, this is what I have, and not giving the diagnostician time to really actually hear your story and know what's going on. So self-awareness is important. Yes, ma'am, question? Yes.
This has been my coming out year that I've finally got over the shame of being bipolar, and I've come out to some of my friends, and it's been very good. I go to a really special church. I camouflage myself very well, but we have some other people there that are mentally ill, and they are so kind to them. I would like to start a ministry there, but I don't know how to get speakers to come. We're a small church, and there won't be a stipend. Where can I go to get those speakers?
Well, NAMI is a great resource. There is family to family. There also is a peer-to-peer, NAMI peer-to-peer. So NAMI has a lot of great resources that you can reach out to. I'm not sure if the Mental Health America office is Mental Health America.
No, American Counseling Association.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
there are a lot of different other mental
Yeah.
health areas that can help as well, associations.
So I would say most definitely there are resources that have speakers that come out and speak at no fee. Many persons have lived experience and may come out and so forth. So depending on the kind of speakers you're looking for.
Yeah. Are there any faith-based speakers, or, because this is a church that we're starting ministry in, so I want to incorporate spirituality.
Yeah, there's NAMI FaithNet. Doug Beach is in charge of NAMI FaithNet, and I'm sure NAMI FaithNet is active here in San Antonio. So reach out to NAMI FaithNet, and they can connect you with some faith leaders.
And I can tell you too now, as far as your training of counselors, realizing that, like I said, decades ago, we couldn't even talk about spirituality in counseling. Now that's changed. We realize we have to work with the whole person, and a large percentage of what a person is bringing to you is based on their faith. Now, getting that right person, that right individual, that right counselor, that varies no matter what you're coming in for. But there are, again, pastoral counselors that are out there that have been trained actually to be counselors. So, finding those, there's an association with that as well. So, you can talk to me more afterwards, and I can get your maybe email. We can try to connect you.
We have 4 minutes. 2 people stand at the mic. Let's try to get them through.
Yes, my name is James, and I actually been working in the field as far as in the streets, straight up the streets, under the bridges, and through the Haven Folk. And there's so much mental ill problem, but to actually get people to go to counseling, to actually get into facilities, is quite as hard. And I see people suffering. I'm actually dealing with a situation where I have a good friend of mine, my lady friend, that I've been trying to back that for 5, 6 years. And it's a bipolar situation, and they'll do good for 4 years. And then I'll slack up because I already know that they're in routine taking medicine. Then all of a sudden they just stop. And I know the difference in when you're not taking medicine and when you're not. But when I mention anything being personally, it's a total headache, it's a total disaster. And I'm going to classes trying to learn what mental illness actually is. Because I be saying, oh man, that's crazy, that's this, that's that. I'm like, oh, it's just it's chemicals, it's this, it's that. But it's a tough situation and a very good down-to-earth education, faith-based, to really know what this problem is. And in the black neighborhoods, me coming up, we thought it was a crazy thing, but it is a serious situation now. And I can see it in generational as far as through the kids' kids, to where it's just reflected. What do you do in situations like that? I'm doing the best I can as far as trying to get educated so I know how to deal with it. Through Jesus and through their education. I take it to the doctor. Then the doctor say, well, you can't say that, they got to say that. And then doctors prescribe medicine. Then they go, they don't take it. What do you do?
That's a loaded question that we only have 2 minutes to try to answer. We can't. NAMI does have a Sharing Hope program, and it does have an African-American focus to it. And so I would encourage you to reach out. I know we keep saying NAMI, but NAMI is a great resource here in the community. I will say, yes.
Can I say this too, though, really quickly? You know, and again, thank you, all of you that have come up and asked these questions. The reality is you can only do so much.
Yeah.
You can only give so much. And it's that individual, and again, not necessarily choice, but, you know, I'll share a personal story. Today is the 1-week anniversary of me having a memorial service for my brother-in-law who was bipolar. And he was an actor, a musician, a singer, and we loved him. And I have all the credentials imaginable, alphabet soup behind my name. And my brother-in-law decided that he was going to stop taking the medication because he felt the lithium blew him up, he was lethargic, he couldn't, his creative nature, all those kinds of things. And we had hospitalized him, we had done emergency detentions, we had had interventions, we had done all those things. And Kevin just finally sat down with us and said, I'm done. I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to get in a car and drive to California. And he did. And when he left, I told my husband, we may never see him again. 5 years later, he lasted 5 years. We didn't think he was going to last that long because he had stopped taking his medication and doing all those different things. We loved Kevin. Kevin loved us. Kevin was a man of God. But Kevin wanted to live his life a certain way, and he felt the medication wasn't helping him do that. As a family, we had to step back and let Kevin be Kevin. That was difficult. There were a lot of tears last Saturday. But the reality is, Kevin is probably singing up in heaven right now, as far as I'm concerned. And I know I did all that I could do, and then I had to let him go.
Out of respect of you standing there for so long, can you answer your question, and then we'll wrap up with that question?
Thank you, I really appreciate that. You mentioned that there's sometimes a therapeutic release in a worship service. And I also have heard many times people encouraging people with depression and anxiety to channel that into intercessory prayer, for example, and the baptism of the Holy Spirit. How does, and I know there's a difference between the soul and the spirit, but how can we as a church balance the culture of worship service to where it doesn't trigger panic attacks and trigger emotional expressions or episodes? And is that an issue that you're seeing, and are there any resources that you can direct us to?
That's a great question. Once again, I think there's some faith communities that are, the worship is more emotionally driven. And then there's some faith traditions where people come to receive and they're not talking back to us. And so where there are services that are emotionally driven, where that's a part of the worship experience, I think it starts with education to be able to discern what could be symptoms of mental health challenges presenting and what could be a true expression of worship. And honestly, as laypersons, it's not our job to diagnose. It's not our job to figure it out. What it is our job is, if it's concerning enough that you're concerned about that person, ask them if they need your help. And so I think your question, there's so many layers to it that we don't have time to really peel those layers back. But I would encourage you to reach out to, if you go to pathwaysofpromise.org website, contact us, that area there, send me that question, let's talk more about it offline. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, perfect answer. So, well, this concludes our session. Thank you so much for the wonderful questions. Let's give them another round of applause. I will give you one more challenge before I end. You know, if you are in a congregation that does not have an educational component as far as mental health is concerned, I would urge you to do that. Your members of your congregation need that. That is a responsibility, because even you being here now that you've been informed and you know it, you've got to do something with it. That's what God says. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you next year. All right. Have a great afternoon.